Hey y'all, happy Unfiltered Friday. It's been 2 weeks since I've had the pleasure of jumping on live to have an Unfiltered Friday. Last week was my birthday, and so I was on vacation. I took time off. And then on the Friday prior, we had our monthly content shoot for I Choose the Ladder. But I am extremely excited to be back today talking about something that I think is on the tops of people's minds, right? And people are thinking about how to retain Black talent and like, why are people leaving? Because companies feel like they're doing the right things. They're trying, they're making strides. And so today we're going to talk about why Black women are leaving corporate based on some feedback, some research that we've seen and based on our community, what we're hearing in these streets. But before I jump to that, for those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Watchen Nyanue, and I'm the founder and CEO of I Choose the Ladder, which is a career development agency that helps large corporations retain and develop their high-performing Black female talent. And we do that through professional development workshops, curated events, and digital resources such as this one called Unfiltered Fridays, What Your Black Employees Aren't Saying. And the thought process behind this show is there are things that employees would say to us that they may not necessarily say to the decision makers within their organizations because they might be afraid of retaliation, being fired, being blacklisted, being stereotyped. But that information needs to get back to employers in order for them to make informed decisions on how they move forward dealing with and creating strategies for the diverse people who work within their offices. And so this is my way of being a bridge between those two populations. But before we get started, the Climb. So we do a career summit every year called the Climb. It is a one-day summit. This year it's on Saturday, September 25th. We do that on a Saturday so that employees don't have to take PTO. The theme for this year is not a trend, but a takeover. There's been a lot of fear and conversations with Black people that the current attention that is being paid to Black people and the resources that are being allocated to Black people is just a trend for corporate. And when the next crisis or the next hot button thing comes up, they will forget and reallocate those resources in that time to other populations. And so for us, it's important that we equip people with the tools so that if this is in fact a trend, which I'm not sure that it is, if it is in fact a trend, that they have the resources and the skills that they need to take over their careers so that if this passes, they can still have careers that they love and they are excited about going to and showing up for every day. Tickets, pre-sale tickets, and today it's $100 off the ticket. So if you want to attend, go to choosetheladder.com and there's a tab for the Climb. All the information about the summit is on there. Pre-sale ends today. And so if you want to take advantage of your employees, want to take advantage, or if you want to sponsor an employee to attend, today would be the day to take advantage of that, because once the sale is over, it's regular price tickets until they sell out. And I think we have maybe like 75 tickets left before we open up to the general public. So again, that is choosetheladder.com. And there's a tab for the Climb. And then you just enter the promo code presale at checkout and you will get the $100 off the ticket. So hopefully I will see you and some of your colleagues at the Climb on Saturday, September 25th. But what we're here to talk about today is why Black women are leaving corporate America. I think that if you look at the entrepreneurship numbers, you'll see that Black women are starting businesses at a faster rate than any other population, even though they're raising less capital. And even though in terms of revenue generation, the outlook may look a little bit more bleak for them than others. But a lot of them are saying, I'd rather take my chances on myself than continuing to deal with the environments, the people, the structures that corporate provides, even though there are tons of benefits, right? And for a lot of decision makers, it doesn't make sense, right? Because there's a security of a job. There's the guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks, depending on who you work for. And I think that there is an ask for Black and brown talent to be a little bit patient with corporate as they work through what strategies there are for creating more inclusive workspaces, right? But for a lot of the Black women within our network and the conversations that we've been having, the question that comes up a lot is, how much more time are we expected to endure these conditions, right? We feel like we've given a ton of time already. Things are moving really slowly. And I still don't feel the impact of all the conversations that have been, the heightened conversations that have been top of mind for, almost 2 years now at this point, right? And so there's a level of distrust that I think that there is that, again, when I began talking about the summit, that this is just a trend for corporate, but that they are actually going to do a bunch of strategic plans that lead to nothing. And so there is a sense of, I would rather leave than sit and wait and be disappointed at what is rolled out. So one of the things that we decided to do is to have conversations with Black women, right? Talking about Black women who have left corporate, to talk to them about why they actually left. And there's been a variety of reasons. One of the things that I was extremely surprised by is how much pain is still associated with that decision, right? There are some women, like a few of the women cried during their interviews because they just couldn't understand why who they were warranted the kind of treatment that they felt that they received while they were in corporate America, right? And so today we're going to talk about 8 of the common themes that came up in our video interviews. I'm still deciding what we'll do with those interviews. I'm sure there'll be like social media pieces because they're pretty short. But the first thing that came up is that they feel unsupported, right? And that their voices are minimized in spaces where they have expertise. So there were women who were, PhDs, women who had master's degrees and things of that nature, who in meetings, right, they would speak up for things that were considered part of their roles, and they were minimized, whether it was by colleagues or by their managers, and there were not allies in the room who would stand in the gap for them, or managers who would correct the action or correct the behaviors in the room. And so a lot of the times they felt like they were on their own, where there was a team of people who had support, who had the backing of their manager. But when it came to them, it seems like their ideas were often unsupported, and their voices, although articulated that they wanted those voices at the table, when they were actually at the table, nobody wanted to listen to what they were there. It was kind of like, we have you here to check a box to say that, hey, look, we're diverse. We have, this amount of representation on the team. But when it came down to it, you didn't support them and you didn't value the perspective that they were supposed to bring to the table. And something like that is a pretty easy fix, right? Like, as a manager, it is your job to make sure that the voices that are part of your organization or part of your department are not just like your yes man, right? The people who think the same way that you do, who problem solve the same way that you do, who have exactly the same belief systems as you do, because that is partially one of the things that robs employers of having a lot of innovation, right? Because it's a lot of people thinking the same way, doing the same thing. The value in a diverse and inclusive team is that you have different perspectives and different life experiences and different professional experiences, different educational experiences that add to the richness of what is possible within the department. And so you want to make sure that the voices that are heard aren't always necessarily the voices that are the loudest, because sometimes, right, there are people who may be shut down or maybe a little bit quieter who have a tremendous amount of value to add to the team. The second thing that came up a lot is that they did not feel included. So there was one woman who told a story about her manager setting up team lunches and not including her, right? And then when everybody else was leaving, she would ask where they were going, and it would be a casual like, oh, we're going to lunch. Did you want to come, or are you busy? Or she would find out about the team lunches like after they had happened, and they weren't set up by colleagues. They were set up by the person who was managing the department, right? And so that level of kind of unprofessionalism within the workplace, there really is there should be a zero tolerance policy for that, right? That's different than if it's a one-on-one meeting with someone. But if you're creating team type events or team type connections, right? Because at the end of the day, the more cohesive your team is, the easier your job as a manager is, right? Because they can function without you. But if you are the person who's creating division within the group that works for you, right? Like, that is a whole other can of worms that once it's unleashed, you can't necessarily put back, right? Because now the attitude is that the people who are on your list are going to continue to behave that way because they want to remain in your favor. And so they may not be as collaborative with a person who's been outcast, right, as they would have been if there was a united front that was expected of the team, and not a level of division because someone may not be exactly what you thought or what you need, right? And if it's a fit, right, a person to position fit, then you decide whether that person stays on the team or not. But it's entirely hurtful to create environments where you're pitting employees against each other for reasons that are not well, there is no reason, right? There should not be an environment where you are where it is allowed to have a division of your staff that is led by you. A third thing that came up a ton is that being the only one is a lot of pressure. And I think we talked about the onlys a few episodes back, and feeling like they had to be the voice for their entire race. And we know that people are not monolithic. We know that Black folks are not a monolith, right? Like an African Black person versus an African-American Black person versus a Caribbean Black person. There are commonalities, right? And we are all Black, but our experiences, how we're raised, our values, like they differ, right? Even regionally, someone raised in the South versus someone raised on the East Coast, completely different way of thinking. They're still all Black people. And the expectation that one person can speak for an entire group is a lot, because then there's if I'm the only Black person in this position, if I mess up, now it's going to be used as justification not to allow anyone else who looks like me this level of an opportunity. And it's just not a healthy environment. And there are some people who are able to power through, but as you think through the composition of your department, know that there is a level of discomfort and a level of struggle that some of your Black employees are feeling if they have no one else on the team or no representation of anybody who looks like them. And if you look at senior leadership, you know that there are companies who don't even have Black people, let alone Black women in senior leadership. And so it begs the question, is there something for me to aspire to in this organization? Has there not been another Black woman who was smart enough, hardworking enough, resourceful enough to get into leadership? Or is that just not something that's possible for someone like me? If it's a more established company and you still have departments where there's a lot of onlys, then the question is, why is that, right? Like, why is it that 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, I'm still the only Black person in this department? And for some people, the conclusion that they come to is that you really don't want them there. You're just having them as the only there to check a box. And so you're not really going to prioritize their growth and their health within your organization. And so they leave. The fourth thing that came up is that they feel invisible. It's like they're not even there. Like, you don't see them. You don't want to see them. They're there kind of as like decorations that you can like put out when company comes. And then as soon as company goes back, they go back into the cabinet. And so a lot of what they were able to give, they talked about being underutilized, doing a lot of busy work. And when there were things that were of high value, they were never, one of the first people picked to contribute. When there were opportunities for more visibility, whether that be panels or meetings, presentations for senior leadership, it's kind of like they didn't even exist, even though they had the skill sets. And some of them had more experience and more credentials than their colleagues. They just felt like you didn't see them. And that might not have been an intentional action, but when people feel invisible, they tend to disappear and they don't contribute as much, right? Because if they don't feel like you see their value, then what's the point? They will be there to collect a paycheck and then go home to their families or whatever their passion projects may be, or building up their side businesses so that they can get the revenue to a place where they can leave. And so you want to think through how much visibility the members of your team are getting, and who are the members of the team who are getting those opportunities, and do you actually see and acknowledge all of the members of your team for the unique values that they bring to the organization? The fifth thing that they mentioned is that they just didn't see a path to leadership. And I touched on this briefly a couple of points ago. It's that if there's nobody like me who's ever made it to leadership, and every time I ask for feedback about getting to leadership, I get feedback that I can't really use, and that's not really feedback. And I aspire to be a leader. I think in the Lean In survey, it said more so than anybody else, Black women, right, statistically responded that they aspire to senior leadership. Well, if they don't feel like it's possible for them, they're going to create opportunities where they can be leaders and where their skill sets can be used. So one of the people that I think about all the time, so I have a friend named Kim, and Kim was in corporate for maybe 2 or 3 years. I'm blanking on that, but decided that it wasn't for her. And within 5 years of having her own company, she has, almost an 8-figure business. So if Kim had the skill set and the resources to build a $1 million, multi-million dollar company, she had those skill sets when she was working for corporate. Where was the breakdown that she felt like she couldn't, right, bring those talents to an organization, and that the only option really for providing a thriving, having a thriving career was to build it herself, right? And not to say that, eventually Kim wouldn't have become an entrepreneur, but if you have a conversation with her about why she left corporate, that's part of it, right? She didn't want to deal with that. And for a lot of people, for a lot of the entrepreneurs I know, they're phenomenal leaders who in corporate never got the opportunity to show those leadership abilities, right? And so think now, are there people in your organization who aspire to be leaders, but they're not been giving opportunities to, or not even being talked to about opportunities? Those people will leave. They will find leadership opportunities somewhere else, because if you desire to be a leader, that's something that's in you, right? And it doesn't go away. I'm someone who, from the time I was 3, I was telling someone I was organizing neighborhood talent shows in Liberia, right? It's a part of the nature of who I am. And so that doesn't die down. Just because you and your organization and your department has chosen not to give somebody leadership opportunities doesn't mean that their desire to be a leader is going to fade away. What will happen is they will find a place or create a place where they can develop and become a leader of people. And so if there's someone who is within your organization who you think has potential and you want to retain them, finding smaller areas of leadership where they can, learn and test their chops. I think that's the phrase, at being leaders. And then, you will have a better chance of retaining talent. And I know one of the things that they talk about at the director level is if you're going for a director level position, you have to have proven that you can manage people. But if you don't give somebody an opportunity to manage people until they're a director, where are they supposed to get that experience, right? And so thinking through some of the ways in which we manage the different positions and things like that within the organization. But again, if someone wants to be a leader, they're either going to do it with you or without you. And so if it's someone that you want to retain, you want to think about different ways that they can learn about leadership and also assert their own leadership capabilities. The 6th thing that they talked about is that the bar is set so high relative to their colleagues for the same opportunities. And this kind of goes to the last points. I'll combine them. It says that people feel that white people are taught and Black people are tested, right? So for a lot of their white colleagues, they are given roles based on potential, right? We see the potential in you. And so we're going to invest in you to grow these opportunities. For Black folks, though, it feels like they have to have already demonstrated this for years and years and years before they're even considered or their hats are thrown in the ring for opportunities. And so the bar is set so high that sometimes you can't hit it. And people are only going to be okay with failing, right? Even though they're doing their best for so long before they might start to think hey, this probably isn't for me. And so looking at the metrics, right? How are you measuring your employees? What are the ways in which they are demonstrating the competencies that are required for the different levels? And are those things realistic, and are they the same across everyone within that? Is there transparency in what it takes to get to the next level, right? And it's going to be case by case for some things, but there are certain things around career progression that should be standard. There are certain competencies that should be standard regardless of, where you're coming from, to be able to occupy certain seats and occupy certain roles. So people who are responsible for managing talent, there should be certain boxes that they all have to check regardless of their background or their demographic, right? There should be certain trainings. There should be certain things that are required. And again, make sure that the bar is not that it's lower, but it's set to a place that is that people can attain, right? It's an attainable bar. And then the last thing that came up about people leaving was around pay disparity. I think I've talked about this before. I have a friend who realized that his colleague with the same amount of years of experience, the same amount of credentialing, was making $100,000 more than he was for the same job. Now, to me, that is egregious. To have that level of a pay gap, right? And it's not an executive to an executive, right? Middle management and all of that, right? And so for him, it was a big slap in the face. But if you look at women, right? If you look at Black women, there are people within your departments, and maybe it's because they didn't negotiate, you know, in the way that they should have and all those things. But if you were the manager, you were the person on the other side of the table who knew what the numbers were, and you allowed somebody to work for you knowing that they were severely underpaid, and you felt good about it. To the person on the receiving end of that, they don't feel good about it, right? And they feel like you are undervaluing them. Now, am I saying that you should not be looking to save your company money and all that? No. But what I am saying that it should not be at the expense and the dignity of someone who you claim to be a high performing or a high value talent to your organization. And so I think with the frustrations of feeling like, well, you know, we're going to be underpaid, we're not going to be seen, we're going to be undervalued, they don't really want us here. That is the conclusion that the women we talked to came with, and they left, right? And so as you think about retaining people and forming relationships with the people who work for you, and, you know, having people grow within your organizations, attracting new high performing talent, you got to think about the ways in which the people who are sitting in those seats and across the table from you are feeling in the environment that has been created, whether by you or by just the culture that your organization has. But Black women are leaving. They feel like they can figure it out, right? Like they've experienced things in corporate that they don't think can necessarily be worse outside, and they're willing to take that chance. And so it's up to the companies, I think, to meet them halfway, right? If you want to retain Black high-performing female talent, you got to meet them halfway. And there are certain things that are going to move slowly, but there are other things that are within the control of leadership that I think, if given some intentionality to and some strategic thought partnership with the Black folks who work for you, could yield amazing results for those organizations. But I think I've rambled on enough for today. Again, before I leave, I'm not going to, because I really want y'all to get these discounts. If you want to come to the Climb, we'll be talking about some of this stuff at the Climb, but you can learn about the sessions on choosetheladder.com. Click on the Climb, and then again, the code is pre-sale to get the $100 off the ticket for the September 25th event. As always, if you want to keep the conversation going, you can find us on Instagram at I Choose the Ladder, LinkedIn at I Choose the Ladder, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.